My name is Richard Misenhimer, and today is September the 4th, 2002. I'm interviewing Mr. Robert Rodenhouse, Rodenhouse, of apartment 5038, 2105 Raybrook Southeast, Grand Rapids, Michigan, 49546. This interview is taking place at the home of his daughter in Goshen, Indiana. This interview is in support of the National Museum of the Pacific War Center for Pacific War Studies for the preservation of historical information related to World War II.
If you're my friend, you do.
Okay, yeah. All right, Bob. I want to thank you for taking time to do this interview today. Let me start off by asking you, where were you born?
I was born on the 26th of May, 1921.
Okay, and where were you born?
I was born in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Okay. And did you have brothers and sisters?
I have one brother and one sister that are alive.
Well, how about originally, how many did you have?
One brother passed away just a year ago.
Okay, so you had two brothers and
Yes.
one sister. Mm-hmm. Were either of those in World War II?
One of them was in the Coast Guard,
Okay.
but he was not in active duty. He stayed in the States.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. All right. And what were your parents' names?
My father's name was Albert.
Okay.
My mother's name was Beatrice.
Okay. And where were they born?
They were both born in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Okay.
So we're kind of natives of that area.
Okay, good. And where did you go to school?
Well, I was raised on a farm, and I went to school at Simon School, District number 19, one-room school for the first 8 grades.
Okay.
Then in town, I went to Union High School and got my training there. And then from there, I entered into Calvin College, and I left from service from there.
Okay. What year did you finish high school?
1938.
38, okay. And then you went to college, and from there you went into the service.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Okay. In December 741, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. Do you recall that?
I sure do.
And where did you hear about it, and how did that?
Well, I tell you, it was on a Sunday. We were coming home from church, and Mom always had a big Sunday dinner. We sat down and we turned our little Atwater Kent radio on, and there was H.V. Kaltenborn saying Pearl Harbor was bombed. And I looked at Dad and I said, Dad, where is Pearl Harbor? And he said, son, I don't know, but let's find out. Well, we did grabbed an old atlas and found out where Pearl Harbor was, is the largest naval base that the United States had. Right. And I guess the radio reports were telling all about the disastrous attack that the Japanese made on that fortress, and that was it. And
how old were you at that time?
I was 19.
19, okay. And how did you feel that might affect you?
Well, I tell you, as I say, I was in college at the time, and the next day, which was Monday, all classes were suspended, and we just sat around in bull sessions, with the teachers, the professors, and so on. What's happening? What's going to happen to our education? And what's our future here? 4 of us guys were in the dormitory, and we says, you know what? I think we better enlist. Well, that wasn't too popular, but we went down to the Grand Rapids Armory, and that was on a Monday, December 8th, and there were all these sergeants out here in the various services wanting to sign you up. The Air Force at that time looked the best to me.
Okay.
So not knowing anything, we're very naive, you got to know that.
Sure.
We had no preparation for this. So we all signed up to join the U.S. Army Air Corps.
Right. Okay. So you joined on December 8th of 41 then?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, we didn't get called until the next month. They didn't have room for people.
Right.
They didn't have training facilities, didn't have airplanes, they didn't have bases, they didn't have instructors. And this was a week after that we got bombed, and so it was actually a month, okay, January, before that I got called into service.
Okay, so in January of 42, then you were actually called in.
That's right.
And we're at Grand Rapids?
Yes, I left Grand Rapids and headed for San Antonio, Texas, Kelly Field.
Kelly Field.
Yep.
And how did you travel?
And that was the Cadet Training Detachment of the Southwest Training Command.
Okay. How did you travel down there?
I traveled alone with a $15 voucher, and that was to take care of all the food en route on the train.
Okay.
And I think by the time I got to St. Louis, all my money was gone. I didn't know how expensive those train meals were.
Okay.
But they gave me a upper berth.
Okay.
I was on the train 3 nights.
Okay.
But that was the first train ride I ever had in my life.
Okay.
Yeah, from Grand Rapids to San Antonio, Texas.
And you were by yourself? You weren't with a group or
I was
anything?
all by myself. Just one.
Okay.
There might have been others on there, but we didn't leave as a group or a contingent, you know.
Okay.
We just all by ourselves.
Okay. And then you reported down to Kelly Field.
You went?
You reported down to Kelly Field.
Yep, and that was really a cadet training detachment center.
Do you have
And
the
that
date?
was sort of a introduction to, hey, Army life and all that, you know, it's sort of a basic training.
Do you have the date you reported there? What date did you reported there? Do you have that?
That was in March 28 when I left the cadet training detachment.
No, when you got there. When did you get there?
We got there on the, we got there on January 28,
Okay.
1942.
Okay.
And we left there in March. We were there 2 months.
Okay. And what all did your training there consist of?
Well, they said when we got into the cadet program that they'd make a pilot out of us in 9 months.
Okay.
So we had 3 phases that we had to go through: primary, basic, and advanced training.
Okay.
And I first went for my primary training, I went to Ritchie Flying Field in Victory Field, Vernon, Texas.
Okay.
And we flew the Fairchild PT-19A.
Okay.
That was the first airplane I ever flew in my life, and that was my introduction to military aircraft. And I graduated from Victory Field on the 30th of May and went to Perrin Field in Sherman, Texas.
Okay.
And there we graduated into a larger plane, 450 horsepower, and it had instruments, and we did night flying and formation flying and so on.
Okay.
And that was with a BT Vultee vibrator.
Okay.
I left there on August 1st in 42. And there I went to Ellington Field in Houston, Texas. And there we flew the Cessna Bamboo Bomber, AT-9s, AT-10s, AT-11s.
Right.
And I graduated from Ellington Field as a second lieutenant with my silver wings as a pilot on the 9th of October in 42.
Okay. So 9 months they did do it, right?
Yeah, that was it. By hook or crook, they made a pilot out of me.
Okay. Let's go back to the very first flying you did. How long did it take you to solo?
Well, I tell you, I was in Victory Field in Vernon, Texas, and that's right on the Oklahoma border. And this was early in the year, and it seemed like we had an awful lot of bad weather, rain and so on. It took me 12 hours. A lot of the guys were soloing in 6, 8 hours. It took me 12 hours to.
Okay.
In fact, that kind of, in a sense, kind of discouraged me. I wondered, hey, am I going to make it or not, you know?
Okay.
Because they had a pretty heavy washout ratio.
Yeah. Now, was this a two-wing or single-wing plane?
No, this was a single wing, a low wing monoplane.
Okay.
Fairchild PT-19.
Okay.
And it was a nice looking airplane.
Right.
Many of other primary groups had the biplane, the Waco and Stearman.
Right. Okay. But you didn't get in the Stearman then?
No.
Okay. Then it's the second field. What kind of plane was that? That was a Vultee vibrator?
That was, that was a Vultee vibrator we called BT-13.
Right. Okay.
And it was a loud, you know, it made a lot of noise. And when you sat in the cockpit, you know, you couldn't even see straight ahead. You have to look sideways, you know.
Okay.
And that's why when you would taxi on a runway, you're always taxiing like this, you know.
Back and forth.
Back, yeah, because you couldn't see straight ahead. Once the tail got on a runway, you're always taxiing like this, you know.
back and forth.
Back, yeah, because you couldn't see straight ahead. Once the tail got off the ground, then you could see straight ahead. See?
Now, these were all tail draggers.
Yeah, they were all tail draggers, yeah. Yeah, even our advanced trainers were the twin engine.
Right. Okay. Then you went to the Sherman, and was the transition to multi-engine at that point?
No, Sherman was a multi-vibrator.
Oh.
See, in Ellington
Oh,
Field.
Ellington. Okay.
Yeah, that's where we got into the twin engine.
That was the transition to twin engine.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's when they asked us, what would you like to... at that time, we had not flown any tactical airplanes, so it's just all training planes.
Mm-hmm.
And we were close to the end of graduating, so they foolishly asked us, what would you like to fly as a tactical plane? Well, what do you think we should... Everyone wanted to fly the P-38. I put that down too.
Yeah.
That Lockheed Lightning.
Right.
To a flyer, that was the dream plane, you know. But they took one look at my size and they said, hey, you go into a bomber. And that's exactly what happened.
Okay. Now let's go back. During all this training, were there any particular incidents that happened? Anything, any emergencies you might have had or anything like that?
Well, I guess every time we take off, it's an emergency. You know, flying was so strange. I came from a farm, you know. I could milk a cow, but flying an airplane was something else, you know. And what the Army could do to a fellow like me was very impressive. But I still didn't enjoy the dynamics or the wonder of it. Okay. What makes a plane get off the air? I had no idea.
Right.
You know, I had no training in this. Okay. So they took bare recruits and made flyers out of them, you know. And that always was a mystery to me. But anyway, I never had a situation where I had to bail out of an airplane.
Okay.
And that to me would have been the biggest trauma that could have occurred, you know, especially at night. I was always able to find my way back. Not that I never wasn't lost. I got lost, but was able to find myself and orientate myself again. And we had some close calls on some formation flying. We've had some wing tips that were nicked, you know. Nothing that was serious that would bring us down.
Ever have any engine trouble?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. We've had engine failure, and I guess a good instructor, his primary object is not only teach you how to fly, but what to do in an emergency. Right. And what is the greatest emergency is when you lost power. Right. And they would always give us this dead stick business, you know. They'd turn off the fuel or pull the throttle back or actual, those are all simulated instances. Actual engine failure, I don't think I've ever had one until I was overseas.
Okay.
Have you got a plane now? Probably the worst thing can happen is hit some mesquite.
Yeah, right. Yeah. There were a lot of training fields in Texas.
Oh, training fields from one end to the next.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else in your training of significance? Do you remember anything when you're going through training?
Well, like I say, I graduated in the 9th of October in '42, and my girlfriend, which is my wife now, came down there with my parents.
Okay.
And pinned my wings on, and that was a big event. I asked for a 30-day leave, and nobody gets leaves. You know, we're nicely in the war at that time, you know, so nobody got leaves. I asked for a delay en route, and I couldn't get that, and they shipped me to 4-engine school.
Okay.
That was at Hendricks Field in Sebring, Florida. Okay. And we went down there and as a brand new second lieutenant and flew the B model. That's before Boeing had that nice fairing on the tail. Okay. That was a difficult B-17 to fly, but that's all they had. Mm-hmm. That's what they had at Pearl Harbor.
Yeah. Okay.
And I graduated from there as a 4-engine pilot in December of 17 of 42.
3 months there, make a 4-engine pilot out of you.
Yeah, that's, oh, you had your hands full. You had your hands full.
Right.
Yeah, the,
What did it feel like the first time you soloed that 17?
oh yeah, that was something. That was something. That was awesome. That was an awesome plane. You know, training is one thing, but boy, getting into a B-17, and you know, I was just 20 years old, just a kid.
Right.
And I thought, my goodness, what in the world am I doing here with this thing? And every time I'd take to the ground, I'd lift off, you know, I thought, this is the most wonderful experience a person could have, you know. So I was glad I was that far. I felt all through my training that I was not really the best pilot there was. I felt there were men that had prior training. There were some that went in as a cadet that even had their license, you know, or their parents flew, or they lived next door to an airport and they flew every weekend, you know, bum rides or something. I didn't know anything about airplanes. And then when you see so many of them get washed out, that in your mind, hey, they were as qualified or better qualified than what you were. I didn't know all the criteria that a instructor had to make that decision. See? But anyway, I was glad I made it. Glad I made it.
Are there any experiences there that you can recall? Anything happen in particular?
In the training period?
Yeah, there with the 17s.
Well, I think it was you know, you talked about solo. We took 2 students. Usually the instructor pilot is in the right seat, you know.
Okay.
But here he put 2 students on there, and the instructor stood behind us.
Okay.
And this was a night, going to be a navigational flight. And for some reason, I don't know why, he asked the student in the right seat to take off.
Oh.
Nothing really unusual about that. But for some reason, he got off the runway, and boy, all of a sudden we just start going through the fields, you know. Not knowing where you were going, you know. The runway lights were over here, you know. And there we were heading out in the darkness. And I never forget the pilot say, pull her back, because we had sufficient airspeed. So I pulled her back and we gained some altitude. Terrible fright, because you know, you don't know where you're heading for. You could have been running over a truck or a jeep or an ammunition dump, you know, and just going cross country in Florida. But that was a scary thing. We outside of that, nothing outstanding that stood in my mind.
Okay. When you left there, then where did you go?
We were assigned to the 8th Air Force, and we were all lined up on the field, all the crews, to head for England. And Colonel McDaniel called off 6 names, and my name was one. Is this whistling? Colonel McDaniel called off 6 names, and I was one of them, one of the pilots. And he says, report to the reviewing stand. And all these crews were taken off. 4 o'clock the next morning, just a drone of plane taken off for Newfoundland and to the 8th Air Force. Right. We says, hey, where are we going? We don't know. Report to the adjutant in the morning, which we did. Couldn't sleep all night. We got to the adjutant's office, and he says, you're going to AFSAT. AFSAT, what is that? Well, that's the Army Air Force School of Applied Tactics. Well, where is that? It's in Orlando, Florida. Well, what do we do there? They says, report for duty. So they flew us up there in a couple days, and we landed at the old municipal airport right downtown in Orlando. That's all they had. It was all camouflage. They even had, they planted false orange trees right between the runways, made little lakes, and because at that time the Germans were going up and down the whole coast of Florida, you know, and even had they planted false orange trees and right between the runways, made little lakes, and because at that time the Germans were going up and down the whole coast of Florida, and sinking a lot of merchant ships.
Right.
And they were very afraid of that airport, and they had it well camouflaged. I reported to the Army Air Force School of Applied Tactics, and I said, what do we do? Where do we go? And he says, have you had a leave? We said, no, we haven't. He says, you all have 7-day leave. Well, we hopped on a train and we went home, came back, and they assigned us to Brooksville Air Force Base, Brooksville. And that's 50 miles north of Tampa, right on Route 19. That field was built for AFSAT. At that point, we were in the 9th Bomb Group, assigned to the 9th Bomb Group. And I was in that 9th Bomb Group for 2 years and 4 months as an instructor.
Oh, yeah.
It was a special group that was activated to develop tactical and strategic fly-in procedures of the B-17. That was, and it was under the command of General LeMay,
Okay.
who was at that point, I don't think he was a general, I think he was in Washington, in the Pentagon. He was headed for the 8th Air Force for a command position. But then for the next 2 years and 4 months, we were developing strategies that the 8th Air Force used prior to the invasion. We were at a number of air bases on detached service at Kissimmee, at Montbrook in Williston, Florida, at Winter Haven, at Keystone Heights, at Batista Field at 2 different times, at Eglin Field, at Pope Field, at Great Falls, Montana. And at these places we did a variety of things. For instance, at Pope Field, they knew that they had a lot of B-17s in the British theater, and they knew that part of the invasion was going to be done with glider planes.
Yeah.
And they says, why can't we use some of these B-17s that are already here to pull those things? At Pope Field, I was there for 45 days developing techniques to pull these gliders off with various weights at various speeds so we don't stall out, and what it would take to carry certain equipment and troops in the glider. At Eglin Field, they put a Gatling gun in a B-17, and we would fire that as if they were going to use that for a strafer, and they even put in an 80-millimeter gun in the nose of a B-17. We at Vero Beach, they constructed what they knew at what they were going to expect on the invasion in France on the Maginot Line, were all these concrete barriers that would be prohibit tanks from getting on shore. They constructed those all on Vero Beach for a whole 11-mile stretch. What bomb or combination of bombs would level those without creating such big holes that it would bury the tanks? What type of bombs were used, and we would practice that. The Luftwaffe was having some devastating results with the 8th Air Force on frontal attacks, and we would have different types of formations to bring the greatest firepower to the front. And that's what really came to the B-17G, where they put that extra turret in the front of the B-17,
The chin turret.
Yep, that chin turret, yeah. And it was things like that that we were doing for all that time. And we had 12 planes, and we were based at Brooksville Air Base. The minute we got in a B-29, that base was never used again. It was built just for us, and in fact, that's where I met the 504th or 509th people.
Okay.
Yeah, they were all part of that AFSAT.
Oh, okay.
Hmm.
Now, your job was mainly just to fly the plane. Someone else was developing the tactics and that sort of stuff, right?
Oh yeah, that came from higher echelon.
Yeah. And you
We did make a U.S. Air Force training film for the 2nd Air Force,
Okay.
and that was filmed by Hal Roach of Hollywood, and he was had his crews in our planes taking pictures of all these things that were going on.
Yeah. Sounds like a very interesting time.
It was, and very interesting. I didn't realize it really at the time until we were all through with it. And looking back, that was a strategic turning point in our life. Because I was assigned to go to the 8th Air Force, and we know that the attrition rate there was about 50%, you know.
Yeah.
And chances are I never would have made it through that.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
What kind of bomb did they decide would work to blow up those tanks on the beaches?
Well, I'll tell you, actually, it was 100 pounders.
100 pounds?
Yeah, they thought it was 500 or 1,000 pounders or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
It's the saturation bombing of the 100 pounders that really did the best job.
Okay.
And then the Navy would be offshore with LSTs coming up and seeing how they could
Okay.
get through that. That whole procedure took 3 months. Yeah.
You would try different size bombs, get the results.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And formation fly too. And most of it was dropping on the leader, you know,
Yeah.
rather than individual bombing. You know.
Okay. Yeah, I believe they called your bombardier the Tuggalier at that point. They called him a Tuggalier?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Right. Rather than a bombardier, called him a Tuggalier.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
right. Hmm.
Okay. What were some other things y'all worked on? Anything else you recall there?
We went through a standardization school up at Great Falls, Montana. I'll never forget. We put the B-17 to its absolute limits, you know, to see, hey, when would it stop flying, you know? And we got to 41,800 feet, and then she's just mushing along, you know, and nothing was happening. And I'll never forget the instructor that was with us. Now, this was a B-17 standardization school, feathered all 4 engines. And there we put the thing into a glide, and of course, we scared at the time.
Sure.
Just look out both sides and see your props feathered, you know.
Yeah.
But they both restarted again, and we took the plane down. That was an eerie, awesome feeling, you know.
Yeah. You could start the engines again okay, though.
Yeah. But that was right up there on the northern limits of the United States, you know. And by the way, we took off from Florida in suntans. We got up there, you know, and I think it was January. Winter. Yeah, but we had our winter flying gear.
Yeah.
The B-17s were not pressurized, and we always had to carry our oxygen above 10,000 feet.
And your flying suits to keep you warm and all of that.
The flying suits, yeah. They were actually electrically connected, too.
Okay. I understand the waist gunners particularly had a problem with the cold. The waist gunners particularly had a problem with the cold.
Yeah, well, yeah. You know, they were just exposed to the outside air, you know.
Yeah, that wind blowing.
Oh, that must have been terrible.
Right.
Yeah, it was. And we did a lot of those. The gunners had colored ammunition.
Okay.
And then there were B-26s that would fly with a great big target, curtain target.
A sleeve behind it. Right.
A big sleeve.
Right.
And when these waist gunners would fire on there, they would leave a color print on that target, you know.
Okay.
They could tell who was hitting the target and who wasn't.
Okay.
And then all the guns that we had this aiming point, 16 millimeter aiming point film on there.
Oh, okay.
So when the planes would come in, and by the way, at that time they were P-40s and a couple of P-51s. And this was in the Florida training.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You'd see those planes coming in at you, you know, and somehow they could tell exactly how effective your gunners were.
Okay.
Yeah,
Through the film.
yeah, through the film. Yeah,
Okay.
gun sight aiming point film they had.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. What were some other things?
Well, let's see. Actually, the big thing was, to us at that time, was when we were transferred to the B-29 program. We knew that there was something big in the offing. We didn't know what it was. Had no idea. Well, they did, but we weren't privy to it at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And then they sent us to El Magardo, New Mexico, from Brooksville, Florida,
Okay.
with a B-17. I'll never forget, we had 12 airplanes went over there. For the first time in our life, we saw a B-29.
Okay.
First time in our life. And there it was sitting on that runway, you know. And all of us were itching to get inside, and none of us could, of course.
Right.
And but at least we had our first view of it. And boy, there was that plane, you know. It was no longer a tail dragger.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, the configuration is all different, you know.
Right.
And then they briefed us on what that plane was. It could fly higher, faster, farther, with a greater bomb load than any plane in the inventory of the U.S. Air Force. And that to us just blew our mind. And of course, the war in Europe was winding down. So it's really what was left to finish off was the Japanese. And that's what the B-29 was designed for. There was never a B-29 in the European theater.
Right.
It was always in the Pacific. And the Navy's strategy was island hop. Get as close to Japan as you can, establish a base, and shoot from there. And that's proved to be the right decision. It was a costly decision. Costly decision. They made... Actually, I think whenever I see a Marine, I take my hat off and I says, buddy, I thank you for taking Iwo Jima. We landed there 4 times, and I'll tell you, there's 4 times we never would have made it back home if it wasn't for that.
Right.
But the price that the Marines paid to take that island was tremendous.
Yes. Right.
It was tremendous. But we needed it.
Yeah.
It was halfway to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And the B-17, you know, the wing was nothing more than gas tanks.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it was. And if you got over Japan and you got a few holes in that gas tank, you'd never make it back to Tinian. You had a 40-minute reserve when you got back. That's the way they programmed that thing. The farther we went for a target, the less bombs we carried and the more gas.
Mm-hmm.
And the closer the target, and they had 4 major islands in Japan, see?
Mm-hmm.
And the closer to Tinian, why, the more bombs you could carry, but the less gas. But they always had a 40-minute reserve. But you know, one thing in the Pacific, and that is the unpredictable weather.
Mm-hmm.
They had no weather stations that were reporting, like, there was no such thing as a Doppler radar.
Right.
You know, the only reporting service was a returning cruise. And the meteorologists would always interrogate them, hey, what the weather conditions were, and hopefully on an hour-to-hour basis, both up and back, they would report weather conditions, wind changes, and so forth, you know. And based on that is how they made prognosis for the weather.
I understand. That's where they first discovered the jet stream.
Oh, that was, yeah. That's what made General LeMay a general, was the jet stream. Our first flights to Japan were high altitude, 30,000 and above. And we were so proud of that. Here was that big pressurized airplane flying out there at 30,000 feet, you know, out of the range of flak and out of the range of a lot of anti-aircraft, and we had the best equipment in the world. And all of a sudden, the bomb results were, we were either overshooting the target, I mean, like phenomenally, or we would be undershooting, depending on, they came to the conclusion, there's a jet stream up here, nobody knew about, nobody even had the name of it, and the funny thing was, it was, the results were catastrophic, you know, and LeMay said, hey, we can't waste crews and time and bombs like this, you know. And I think our first 6 raids were at high altitudes in formation. And after that, he says, bring them down to the incendiary level of between 6,000 and 7,000 feet, and we're going to go in there and firebomb. And that decision, I'll never forget. That's what this picture is all about. That's spring morning. And that was the night raid on Tokyo, when actually more devastation was done to Tokyo in those incendiary bombs than what happened on Hiroshima.
Right.
It was but we never thought we'd make it back, you know, because they could throw up almost anything there and hit us, you know. What is a big B-29 doing at 6,000, 7,000 feet, you know?
Right.
And then, of course, you're right in the searchlights,
Yeah.
you know.
But you actually lost less planes that way, is that correct?
Oh, yeah. Well, you know what? More planes were lost to friendly action. And that means in the darkness, collisions.
Yeah.
Everybody was an observer, you know, we're looking, straining around. No navigational lights, no running lights, nothing at all. All you saw was the exhaust of the engine if you were behind the plane.
Yeah.
And if the searchlights would illuminate you, you'd also see them, you know. And they would pass you on from one battery to the next, you know.
Yeah.
In the anti-aircraft, they could tell where the thing were exploding, you know.
Right.
Yeah. But that, and then the thermal clouds. You know, when you set a city on fire, there's tremendous updrafts in those thermal clouds.
Right.
And they have been known to flip over a B-29, and that has happened.
Okay.
Yeah. It becomes uncontrollable. Yeah, those vertical currents exceed 60, 70, 80 miles an hour, or higher than that.
Yeah. Let me put it.
And the way they can confirm that is that they've recovered in time to get back to base and report it. So
They did recover, some of them.
if you didn't recover, there's no reporting.
But I mean, some of them did recover.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Now, if you don't mind, let's go back to when you got to Albuquerque and saw the first B-29. When did you get there? What date?
March 30, 44.
Okay. And what did you do there then?
Well, we were just there. Boeing people were there to show us the plane, which they did. They took us all through it too. No flying. Didn't even start the engines up.
Okay.
But then we had, I think, a 2-day orientation on what that B-29 was, as opposed to what we were flying a B-17. See, so it was really an orientation of that, what we could expect.
Okay.
And knowing too that as they came off the line, there were going to be B-29 groups being formed, of which would be the cadre personnel for those groups.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, to see that tunnel was something, you know. You could travel from one pressurized compartment in the front to the back through a tunnel, and that's what connected the two, you know.
Okay.
And the bomb bay was all here with all their bombs and so forth. Right. What a concept that was, you know. And then a plane that big with a tricycle landing gear was something, you know. Right. We were always brought up 3-point landings, you know.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Right. And this was something new, because even in our training we didn't have any tricycle landing gear, and of course all aerodynamics is based on the tricycle.
Then when did you actually transition to drop flying the B-29?
Well, that was in six-bomb group. At that point, then, when they disbanded the AFSAT,
Okay.
and we went to Grand Island Air Force Base, and that's where we got our first B-29s,
Okay.
and that was in May of '43.
May of 44?
May of '44, and then we got all the personnel in.
Okay.
Little by little, we'd get planes in. We started out, I think, with 3 planes, and everybody was trying to fly them, but we couldn't even keep them airborne. I mean, the mechanics even were having a lot of trouble. They'd go up to Boeing and spend some time there, but they were having some real problems.
Okay.
But anyway, we had more abortions at Grand Island in training than we wondered whether it was. We'd take off on a flight, and be in it for an hour and have probably an engine fire or a jug would blow and back down we'd come. We'd say, hey, you can't fight a war this way. Mm-hmm. They got to be more dependable than that.
Right.
Well, the Pratt Whitney people were there, Boeing people were there, Hamilton people were there. Everyone was there to put out fires. Hey, what do we need to? And they would spare no expense. There were civilians all over the field,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to keep those planes airborne, because we had to develop some time and techniques in this thing, just transition flying,
Right.
And of course we had, and flying in formation, that was a new experience with a much larger airplane.
Yeah.
And
Did you lose many planes and crews from crashes and things?
we had a lot of crashes, yeah. We lost some good crews in training. I'll never forget the first mission that we flew overseas. We had 3 crashes within an hour of Tinian, and well, our bombing flights to Japan, the minimum was 12 hours. The longest one, I think, was 18 hours. When you're an hour from Tinian, you can almost see home.
Yeah.
And yet the plane goes down and you lose crews.
Yeah.
I tell you, that has a demoralizing effect on you,
Right.
And you'd have a tendency to lose faith in the equipment,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think we ever did. We felt that we were still better than the equipment, and we overcame.
So in your transition there at Grand Isle, Nebraska, that you were finding a lot of bugs in the plane and everything else.
It was, yes. Any crash, I would judge it was mechanical in nature.
Okay.
And but I tell you, Boeing admitted they had problems, but they were fighting timeline. The Pentagon says we want those planes over in the Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
Boeing was doing everything they could to get those things and keep them airborne.
Right.
And it was a battle.
The big problem was the engines. Is that right?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Aircraft design, I don't think they faulted that. And I don't know of any changes, basic changes they made in that.
Okay.
But engine, and you see they had 2 banks of cylinders there, and it's that 9 cylinders in the back they couldn't cool off.
Okay.
That's where it was really the problem. And they had put baffle plates and water injection and fuel injection and anything to get those things to stay cool. And we were having trouble, especially in taxiing and keeping the cowl flaps open, because we did that to cool it off, but the problem was bigger than that, and we couldn't do that cowl flap open.
Mm-hmm.
Planes would even try to take off with those, and that wouldn't happen. Just shut it off.
Okay. So anything else there in this transition training in Nebraska, Grand Isle?
We finally got it under our belt. They said we were combat ready.
Now what
We
else?
all got planes assigned to us right off the line.
Okay.
All the training planes stayed behind. We got brand new aircrafts, some from Everett, Washington and Boeing, and some from Wichita. And we got our crew assignments, and then it was a question of developing proficiency amongst your crew. I felt that if we're going to survive this war, every person on that crew had to do their job to the absolute best of their ability. And if we did, our chances of survival were pretty good. So we would frequently have tests, emergency tests. What would we do in case of bailout? What would we do in case of ditching? What would we do in case of fire on board? What would we do in case a kamikaze rammed and took a vertical stabilizer off our plane? All these things we would practice and practice and practice.
Okay, you were saying that you would practice all of these things.
Yeah, and we felt that. And I also had something as an airplane commander, that in the event that a piece of shrapnel disabled me and my pilot, what in the world are the rest of those crew members going to do? So I made a practice that every one of my crew members rode in that right seat on a landing. So they would have some basic feel of what they would have to do in that emergency, that both myself and the co-pilot were disabled.
Okay.
And that could happen at any time. See? And so those were things that we initiated, that we felt that we started feeling comfortable about, that in the event of emergencies that we could handle it.
Was there any of your crew you felt weren't doing the job right?
Before, as I say, we assembled our crew, we had some pretty good serious talks amongst us.
Okay.
There were 11 members of that crew. 2 of them, the crews felt, not just me, the crews felt didn't fit the program.
Okay.
And we asked that they be replaced, which we did. And we got 2 new ones. They happened to be gunners.
Okay.
And what we went over with, we felt very comfortable with.
Okay. Now, what was your group now? What number was it, or what? The 50?
Well, the group we were assigned with was the 6th Bomb Group.
Okay.
I was with the 39th Bomb Squadron,
Okay.
the 6th Bomb Group. Here, this is a picture of my plane, but
Okay.
that's my outfit. You can have that.
Oh, okay. Thank you. 313th Wing. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this is what you left and went over there with.
Yep.
Okay.
We took off from Grand Island, and we went to Kearney, Nebraska, which was our staging area.
Now, when did you take off?
On May 17.
Okay.
No. December 23, 43.
44.
Yep. And
44 or 43?
44.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we went to our staging area at Kearney, Nebraska,
Okay.
did our final checkups there. Then we went to Mather Field, and we got there on the 15th of January.
Mhm.
And that's where we made out our wills, and we got all our last shots, and injections and everything for overseas. And then we took off on the morning of the 28th of January and flew over the Golden Gate Bridge, and we saluted it and said, "Hey, we hope to see you soon." And we headed for Rogers Field in Hawaii.
Okay.
And we landed there. We spent one night and got ordered to take off for Kwajalein that next morning. That's in the Marshall Islands. And we got about 3 hours out of Rogers Field, and I had a fire number 3 engine. And I radioed back, and I said, "I've exhausted all my CO2 cylinders, and the fire won't go out." And they said, what altitude are you at? And I said, 7,000 feet. And he said, put it in a dive right down on the deck. It should go out. So I alerted the crew of what my intention was, and I did. I didn't want that engine to burn off from the wing, and
Yeah.
I put it into a steep dive, and the fire did go out. So I radioed back to Rogers Field, and I said, what do you want me to do? And he said, there's a small naval atoll, Johnson Island. They're just about 70 miles on your direct flight path. They have a single runway there, and it's a patrol base. They got PBYs and PBMs. It's a Navy base. They patrol for Japanese subs between there and Hawaii, and land there. I did that, and they flew a new engine out from Oakland, California, with a crew, and they put the new engine on.
Okay.
We slow timed it, and then went to Tinian. It delayed us about 8 days beyond the rest of our group.
Okay. So you didn't go to Kwajalein then?
Oh yes, we still went to Kwajalein.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was a refueling stop.
Okay.
From Johnson Island, we went to Kwajalein and then to Tinian. Yeah.
Okay. And you arrived Tinian about when?
Well, we arrived on Tinian and on the 2nd of February.
Okay.
And on the 8th of February, we had our first tactical mission.
Let's back up on this trip. Anything else happened on the trip over there? At Kwajalein, you just spend one night there or what?
Well, yeah, and that was our first, all our training was in the States.
Mm-hmm.
This was really the first war zone that we really went into. We didn't see a lot at Hawaii. They stuck us in barracks overnight and got us out to the plane the next morning.
Right.
So we didn't see much of what happened at when the Japanese attacked the harbor. But at Kwajalein we did. We saw war firsthand. We saw trees that were shredded of all leaves. There were no limbs on them. Grotesque looking stalks sticking up all over. And the beach was just littered with all types of armored personnel carriers and tanks and what have you.
Landing craft? Or
And landing craft and all that. So that was our first experience to see it firsthand, When we got to Tinian, we saw some more of that, but this was the first time we saw it. Hey, all of a sudden, this was war. People were dying here, And we spent the night there at Kwajalein. All they had was one runway, and both ends were lapping in the water,
Mm-hmm.
And but it handled our planes okay. We had no problem there, and it was a refueling stop,
Okay.
and then Tinian was our next stop.
Now, was Kwajalein still being bombed by the Japanese or anything?
No. It was in our hands at that time.
Yeah, but I mean, they weren't coming in from somewhere else and bombing them?
No.
Okay.
No. When we landed at Tinian, we had 2 air raid attacks by Japan from truck.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And but we took short work of them. We bombed truck off the map.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was one of the closest Japanese-held islands to the Marianas.
Right. So then on February the 8th, you had your first tactical mission
Yeah, that was the truck.
to truck.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was the truck.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was sort of an orientation. We didn't expect a lot of enemy action. We got a little, not a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't want to send you to Tokyo, which was our next one.
Right.
Our second mission was to Tokyo. And that's when we had the real feeling, hey, now this is for real, guys.
On your mission to truck, how many planes went?
There were 27. I was the first one. I was the lead plane. I was a lead crew. When I left Grand Island, I was a lead crew.
Okay.
And we had 27 planes,
And what altitude did you bomb truck from?
22,000.
22. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And did you hit them pretty well then?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Truck was not a big island,
Mm-hmm.
but what we wanted to do was take out that airfield, and we just bombed that airfield off the map, And they had a couple of refueling dumps there, and that virtually put an end to truck.
Okay.
We never had another raid, from truck since that time.
Okay.
But that was quite a bastion at one time for the Japanese, but yeah.
Okay.
You know, the Pacific had a lot of history, and the Navy and the Marines, you know, they took the brunt of the whole thing, you know.
Yeah.
And because that was just plain island hopping. You had to take one island after another, and that was a costly maneuver. But it was so necessary. It had to be done that way.
That's right.
Yeah.
So then after Chuck, then you went to Tokyo.
Went to Tokyo. That
what-
first mission, oh, that was kind of a disaster. It was, we're going to bomb Tokyo at 33,000 feet, and we had 72 planes. And we went through a front just north of Iwo Jima. And of course, you fly loose formation on the way to a target because you can't stand the pressure of and the stress of tight formation, so you spread out. Well, then all of a sudden that big front was right ahead of us. We had to get over it or underneath it. We were too close to Japan to go underneath it, so we had to go over it. And the leader took us through that front. Well, if you ever drove a car in fog, that's what driving through solid clouds is in an airplane. So we had a procedure that we were going to follow. Each wingman would deviate 30 degrees for a certain period of time, then go on the original heading. And as you're making 500 mile or 500 feet per minute ascent and so on. But anyway, we got up on top, and it was, I think, 35,000 feet before the first one got on top. And we were to bomb at 33,000 feet. Well, at 35,000 feet, everybody looking around, you know, and there's two planes way over there, and there's one over here, and all my crew was saying, hey, I got a couple of them behind me, and, you know, it was pandemonium. Well, we tried to assemble and get together. We didn't even know if they were planes from our group. We couldn't even observe that close, you know. Well, we came together, and we finally went over the target and back home, and that was the bombing. The photos of that bombing raid was pathetic. That was not something we want to ring up as what a credit to our training and the planes that we were flying. I think we lost 3 or 4 planes on that raid, but the weather, and that remained a curse for us bomber pilots, was the weather and the lack of good forecasts, you know, not knowing what to expect. And for the best accuracy, you got to have the best weather, and that wasn't always the case. See? Well, anyway, the decision was made then to go in on low level, which we thought was going to put us all out back in the National Cemetery, you know. But it was proved correct. They made a right decision. Yeah. We went to Tokyo and Yokohama and Kobe and Osaka and Nagoya and just one after another on these incendiary raids and just burned the daylight. And the reason we did that to these towns was not because we were inhuman, but because the way the Japanese, they didn't have big manufacturing plant, the huge ones like we did with General Motors and so on, you know. Every little town and village had their own, they put the stuff together, you know. And we had to almost annihilate them to make sure they lacked the capability of continuing that war. And that's why we went into that incendiary raids. They did a job. And that's why some people say, if we had continued that, we wouldn't have had the necessity of dropping the atomic bomb, you know. But that's another question.
Yeah, I understand that they actually assemble a lot in their homes.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's just what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every home was an assembly plant, you know. Yeah. And they had to destroy that capability of production.
Right.
And that was the way to do it.
Was your second raid over Japan then at a low level?
No. I think we did about 5 high altitudes.
Okay.
And then we developed that jet stream, and that really was what brought us down to. You got to remember, Japan is nothing more than 4 big islands, and they start right from the sea, and they're all mountains. You know what Mount Fujiyama is one of the largest in the world. And all those islands are nothing more than mountains, huge. So the towns are all on the coast of those islands. That's where the population is, all on those coastal towns. Well, then, that's where they had searchlight battery, that's where they had their ack guns, but they also offshore, in the water, they'd have their ack guns there, and the aircraft mounted on ships. And that's how they would get us before we even got to a target. They, when you saw, as I said before, most of these missions were 15, 16, 17 hours long. When you had an incendiary raid, if you took off in the daytime, you bombed at night, and if you took off at night, you bombed in the daytime. So you're always going through a whole day cycle, see, to fly a mission. When you were off the coast at night, and you were maybe the 50th plane to drop your bombs, 50 miles away you could start seeing the flames already. The whole sky was illuminated, And the closer you got, the closer you could get to see that fire, and you saw the flames, and then you got over the target, and you could smell the smoke, and you could feel the heat, and it was because there are convective currents, that are anything that's hot, and boy, that plane was not as manageable as even a big heavy plane like the B-29 was. It was a sight that you'll never forget. Usually, as you peeled off from your target area, if there was fighter aircraft involved, that's when you'd get hit, usually as you left the target area. And we got 2 enemy Japanese planes that way. Our tail gunner got both of them. And that in itself is sort of an eerie feeling when you're flying a B-29 like I was, and there's those tracer bullets coming by the front of your plane, knowing from an enemy plane behind it that's firing at you, and you're trying to take some evasive action, and the B-29 does not respond to evasive action like a P-38 Lightning does, and all the time the crew sees that Japanese plane back there, yelling to our tail gunner, Yo-Yo, that was his name, get him before he gets us. And we had one 20 millimeter gun there and 250 caliber machine guns in the back. And boy, when he let that go, you could feel the plane shudder, because when that kind of ammunition goes, as well as the turret guns, you knew that something was happening. And all of a sudden, alongside comes that plane, and it just blows up right alongside of it. And they all yelled, Yo-Yo, that's your kill. He says, well, it was either us or them. Yeah, that was our first plane. We got 2 of them. In fact, we got the first enemy plane of the all the groups in Antinian. The first one. That was over Kobe. Mm-hmm.
Now, how many total machine guns did you have on a B-29?
How many what?
Guns did you have on a B-29?
Well, and they were all controlled by the Central Fire Control,
Right.
Yeah, that was a beautiful plane as far as armament was concerned. It was well defended, yeah. We had 16 in pairs of 8, 50 caliber.
Okay.
And then we had that 20 millimeter in the back, and that was a powerful gun, yeah.
Yeah. You saw Mount Fuji when you came in sometime, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Daytime, you can see Fuji daytime. It's just like the Matterhorn, you know. Fuji generally is obscured by clouds. But on some days you could see Mount Fuji. It was a spectacle, you know, and it sat there as the gateway to Tokyo, you know.
Yeah.
It was a monument. Yeah, always snow-capped. Yeah.
Let me ask a question. When you were bombing at high altitude, did you stay pressurized when you went over the target, or did you depressurize?
No. Before we even got to the IP,
Okay.
the initial point, we depressurized.
Okay.
Yeah, we would never go over a target pressurized.
Okay.
No, we couldn't take the chance of depressurization.
But from a,
Yeah, that could have been as tragic as being hit by flak, you know.
okay, now, what did you have on? What clothes did you have on when you were flying there?
Well, we had the clothes on that we went to breakfast in,
Okay.
and then we had normal battle gear. Hand me the pictures once.
Okay.
There it is.
Okay.
That's what we had on.
Okay.
And before every mission, we would line up for a crew inspection, just like that.
Okay.
And that's my crew,
Okay.
and that's General LeMay, who's head of the 313th Wing.
Okay.
He went with us on that mining mission.
Okay.
And we had our flak suit, and we had our Mae West on.
Okay.
We had our parachute on, and we had a survival vest on.
Okay.
And that had medicine, morphine, food, spam, everything, you know, survival gear.
Okay.
And then in addition to that, each position had our own one-man life raft.
Okay.
There were two 12-man life rafts on board also, but we each had our own individual one in addition to that.
Okay. So now, when you took off, you were dressed like this.
Just like that.
Okay. And then when you depressurized, did you have to put anything else on to keep you warm, or what?
We altitude was our problem.
Yeah.
Then we would, you know, but otherwise not.
No, I'm talking about you up to 35,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, we had fur-line everything.
Okay. That you
Yeah.
put on
Yeah.
in flight.
Yeah, that's right.
You didn't wear it the whole time.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
No.
And then the name of your plane?
Lucky Strike.
Okay.
That was the name of the plane.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you fly the same plane all the time?
I flew that same plane for the entire war. Flew 35 combat missions that we completed.
Okay.
Flew 536 hours flown in combat. We dropped 1,950 different weight bombs and mines.
Okay.
We had 2 confirmed Japanese fighters destroyed. I think one thing is very important, and that is we never aborted a mission.
Good.
Every mission that we took off, we completed, and that was a real credit to our crew.
Right.
We,
Well, here's the gasoline you used.
yeah,
210,000 gallons. Of,
my flight engineer figured that out.
okay.
Every crew member received a Distinguished Flying Cross with an oak leaf cluster, Air Medal with 5 clusters, Pacific Campaign Ribbon with 5 combat stars, Presidential Unit Citation with an oak leaf cluster, and 2 of my gunners received a Purple Heart.
How were they injured?
Flak, internal, yeah. Bomb burst and flak entered the airplane. Yeah.
One of your bombs burst.
No, the enemy
Anti-aircraft fire.
Aircraft fire, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Did you ever have a bomb hang up in your?
Oh man, I don't know why that had to happen too. And you know, those guys should have got a medal for that, because they had to go in that bomb bay, open it up. There the bomb bay doors are, and there's the enemy looking up at you, you know. And you got to go out there and kick those things off, you know. That's the only way to get them loose.
Yeah.
You got to force them off, you know. And you didn't want to go back home with them.
Yeah.
You don't want to land an airplane with a bomb in your.
Bomb bay, huh?
No way, no way. So,
Does that happen very often?